Hey guys, remember to dislike this video if you want me to talk about Owl House even more. I'm joking, you don't actually have to do that. Oh, look at that, people already did. I am! So, yeah, here I am, making another video about the Owl House. Yeah, I should just stop making promises about these video essays. They're just gonna come out whenever. So just to update you guys a bit first, after my last video on this, a few of you wondered if I was ever gonna make an Owl House YTP, and I'm happy to say that I very much am doing that, because what better way to show my appreciation for a piece of media than to completely desecrate it with dumb, immature edits. That's not even sarcasm, I do actually believe that for some reason. But I'm going to be doing it in kind of a different way. See, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to pick a specific episode to poop, so instead of one big Owl House YTP, I'm instead going to do a whole bunch of really small ones. Similar to what Number 1 does with the Schlock series, I'm going to do a short YTP of every episode, and then compile them all together once I finish a whole season. So you will still get one big Owl House YTP, it's just probably going to be literal years from now. But you'll get shorter and simpler ones spread throughout the year. In fact, I've already done the first two, and they've only taken a few days each to edit, so I'll be able to make those in between other larger projects. I don't know how often they'll come out, maybe like once a month or something, but that's subject to change completely. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, on to the main video. Oh wait, actually, one more thing. I think I may have finally come up with a potential name for this video essay series. So, tell me what you think of this. NP Coseries. No? Yeah? I don't know. I kind of like it. Let me know in the comments what you think. I had to look up exactly what a cosery was, but I think it fits. Also, it sounds a bit like cozy, and isn't that nice? Right, now we'll get on to the main video. So, it's been a week and a half since the first half of the Owl House Season 2 finished airing, and now we're on hiatus for a bit until the second half starts. I wasn't planning on talking about it again until at least after the entire season finished, but I really just couldn't. Not because I'd happily make a video every week talking about this, but because there would just be way too much to fit into an entire video. I mean, look at how long this video is. This is only 10 episodes I'm talking about here. I'm not going to be going over every single detail of every single episode or anything. There's going to be some stuff that you might be expecting me to talk about, and I just kind of skip over because I don't have anything noteworthy to say about it. But I just have to talk about these episodes because Season 2, so far, has, honest to God, been nothing short of amazing. I mean, I enjoyed Season 1, obviously, enough for me to deem the show my new favourite ever thing. I've since learned that this is what is known as a hyperfixation, and is way more common than I thought it was. But Season 2 really just blows Season 1 completely out of the water. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I wouldn't rate any of these episodes anything less than an 8 out of 10, and only a couple of them would even get that. Trust me when I say that there has not been a single filler episode so far. I'll say that again. There has not been a single filler episode so far. Even Knockin' on Hooty's door, which everyone, including myself, thought was gonna be a filler episode, ended up being one of the most condensed, character development heavy, and probably greatest episodes of the entire show. Now, that's not to say that filler episodes are always a bad thing, aside from Once Upon a Swap, which really didn't need to exist. Seriously, this episode is such a drag to get through. I've rewatched the first season multiple times now, and I really just cannot get enjoyment out of this episode. But the other less important episodes, like Really Small Problems or Sense and Insensitivity, are still a lot of fun. It's important to just have the characters spending time with each other outside of super lore imploding scenarios, especially in the first season when you're still getting to know them. But now we're on Season 2, we know the characters, we get them, it's time to shake things up a bit. A lot of people have suspected that the reason for this is because the show has unfortunately been cut short. After Season 2, we're only getting one more season, and it's not even a full season. It's 3 feature-length episodes. Which will probably be cool, but that only really amounts to less than half of a typical season's runtime. So Dana and the crew have had to cut out all the unnecessary parts of this season and kind of condense it down a bit. But if you think about it, this season must have been well into production before this was announced, and Season 2 has been said to be a lot closer to Dana's original vision of the show, so maybe this was the plan all along. Who can say? But while it does suck that we're not getting as much Owl House as we could have done, it certainly hasn't harmed the current season, and even though compared to the first, this season is going at breakneck speed, it doesn't feel rushed at all. So far, at least. I'm really hoping it's not going to have a really rushed finale again. Speaking of which, before I actually get into each of these new episodes, I want to briefly touch upon the Season 1 finale because I intentionally left that out of my last video for spoiler reasons. By the way, spoilers ahead for everything up to yesterday's live. So I got a bit of a negative response about my last Owl Howl video. Owl Howl? I mean, it was mostly positive, and I thank you guys for that, but there was a bit of very minor backlash. Probably not enough to make it worth bringing up, but enough for me to notice. So apparently a YouTuber by the name of Cartoonshi made a big video and another follow-up video about the Owl House and going over a lot of the problems with it. Most notably its unoriginality and how it follows conventions and tropes that have been done before and potentially better by other shows. So I just want to address that I am very well aware of my own personal bias towards this. Like I've mentioned before, I don't watch a lot of shows. I have not seen most of these ideas that the Owl House supposedly has retread, and I understand that heavily skews my opinion in favor of the Owl House. This is ultimately a completely new experience for me, watching a new show as it airs and being heavily involved in the fandom. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case for a lot of other people too. Cartoonshi commented on my video and apologized on behalf of the people who have jumped on the bandwagon of hating this show, and then came to my video, which was like 98% me praising it, and flipped out. And I've watched both of Cartoonshi's videos and they're honestly really good, and I agreed with a lot of the points he made. Some of which I even brought up in my video, like how little development Gus and Willow have had across season 1. And my video wasn't even meant to be critical. You know, these videos are, like I said, just a way for me to talk about things I like and why I like them, and even then I had a few complaints about the show. But I never claimed the show was perfect or better than anything that had come before it. I mean, that's why I called the video "The Owl House is my new favorite ever thing," and not "The Owl House is perfect and brilliant and you should watch it because it's the best thing in the world." Anyway, one of the other major complaints that I wholeheartedly agree with is that the finale, Youngblood Old Souls, is extremely rushed and has awkward pacing. It does. There's no getting around that. I still like it though. And while the previous episode doesn't have all that much going for it in the first half, that battle at the end between Lilith and Eda, what an amazing scene that was. Even if the entire rest of the finale disappointed you, you have to admit that this scene is superb. The animation, the dialogue, the music, everything is so well done here. And this exchange is by far my favorite part.
It's sad to see you slowing down, sister. Tell me, is it the curse?
Maybe it is the curse. But then how pathetic are you that you can't best me at my worst?
Now, while Youngblood Old Souls does go some way to explaining why Lilith cursed Eda, it doesn't justify it by any means, and it's still probably the worst thing she's ever done, but you at least understand her motivations a little better. But I remember people arguing that she still tries to kill Luce in this scene. How do you justify that? Except she isn't really trying to kill her. She's trying to force Eda into a situation where she has to save Luce, and in doing so, use up all her magic. And when that works, and when Eda becomes the Owl Beast and Lilith captures her, she isn't concerned with Luce anymore. Even when Luce tries to attack her, she just pushes her off and tells her to go home. And I love the bit with Eda's eyes filling up with the blackness in a way that looks like she's tearing up, and then right at the end when Luce gets back to the house and just collapses in tears. Like, this is really hard-hitting stuff here, and the show knows exactly how to keep it on such a depressing note. Both King and Hooty have lines here, but despite them both being somewhat comic relief characters, neither one of them detracts from the emotional weight of this scene. And then over the credits they just have a shot of the Emperor's castle with absolutely no music at all. So even if you have a poor opinion of the final episode, Agony of a Witch, or at least the second half, is some top-tier stuff. Right, with that out of the way, let's actually start talking about Season 2. Jeez, this video is going to be so long. Hey, Future NP here. I realized that if you're in the live chat right now during the premiere, you won't be able to see the total length of this video. So I just want to let you know, these first few episodes I don't talk about that extensively, but the later ones I really do. I think that's just a product of them being more recent, so I still had a lot of thoughts buzzing around in my head. So if you start to think, oh, he's only spending about a minute or two on each of these episodes, this video won't be as long as I thought. Trust me, it is. I rabble on for nearly 10 minutes on some of these later sections. Okay, I'll be honest, Separate Tides is probably the least interesting episode of Season 2 so far, but it's still pretty good. It more or less serves as a way to pick up the pieces from the Season 1 finale, and it does that well, while also giving us a jolly little pirate adventure, some heartfelt Eda and Luce moments, and a fun Lilith and Hooty B-plot. I do really like the little moment where it's revealed that Eda was the one who robbed the ship, not knowing that Luce was part of the crew and would have got a cut of the reward money anyway. So Luce has a go at Eda for robbing them and then losing the money, and then Eda has a go at Luce for her being on the ship in the first place. It's just a fun moment. But then it's immediately interrupted by our first proper introduction to the Golden Guard. Now, seemingly a lot of people were instantly drawn to this character. Was I one of those people?
No.
I don't know, he just seemed very generic in his first appearance, but I'll talk more about him later on, because I really don't have much to go off of here. I suppose I can use this time to talk about Hooty and Lilith's friendship here, as this is where it begins, which is funny because 2 episodes ago he was literally beating her up. But like I said before, I'm all for their friendship, as throughout all of Season 1, Hooty was either the punching bag or he was just being ignored completely. And I like that it's not just Lilith putting up with him or humoring him. No, they genuinely care about each other and help each other. And Hooty's in tears when she leaves. I do hope we see Lilith again later this season. Escaping Expulsion, which my flipping computer keeps autocorrecting to Explosion while I'm writing this script, is another just really fun episode. We get properly introduced to Amity's parents rather than flashback silhouettes and background cameos. And while Odalia is pretty much exactly what everyone expected she'd be, Alador was a lot more aloof than people thought. He still has some of those same manipulative parent traits like Odalia that we saw in Understanding Willio. Willio? But a lot of the time he just seems so done with everything.
Another day, another migraine.
Like he's been completely overworked making these Abomaton soldiers and things. And he just does weird things like chase butterflies and play with Principal Bump's Palisman's tail. But Odalia, yeah, she's, bit of a bitch. Apparently the necklace Amity wears and has been wearing for years has been a way for her mother to communicate with her, telling her what to do, manipulating her, and it's just such a great moment when Amity just breaks it in her hand without even turning around. I do really like the little montage of Luce, Gus, and Willow trying to get back into Hexside and Bump stopping them. Anytime this show does a montage, it's always hilarious. And I like that Bump actually gets upset that he has to keep turning them away, because he wants them back too, but his hand has been forced by the Parent Creature Association, which, you know I love me a good pun. I don't know if I even mentioned Principal Bump in my last video, but I like that he genuinely cares about his students and isn't like pretty much every other fictional school principal I can think of. And yeah, obviously I love the scene where Amity comes in to save Luce, everyone does. It's funny, I remember everyone losing their minds over Amity saying, "Stay away from my Luce!" When in retrospect, that's actually one of the tamest Lumity moments this season. And of course, this is when Luce actually starts developing feelings for Amity. But I mean, I'll get on to the Lumity stuff later on, because there is a hell of a lot to talk about there.
Trousers of the past!
Somber is probably the best way to describe this episode. It's the only one so far to feature no other characters except the Owl House residents, unless you count John Luke, which I gotta say, they are definitely setting him up for something later on. I mean, they establish in this episode that he can't leave the tower, and then at the end they're just like, screw it, let's take him out of the tower, give him a name, and let him sit at the back of Luce's room as some creepy decoration. I mean, there's gotta be some Chekhov's gun shenanigans going on here. But yeah, this is definitely a much quieter episode, focusing primarily on King's backstory, which is great because despite him being one of the main 3 primary characters, we don't really know anything about him. Also, side note, I finally got my King plush. I've been waiting for months for this stupid thing to be on sale again. They finally got some new ones in stock on the Mystery Shack on July 31st, and then they sold out again less than 2 days later, so I'm glad I ordered mine when I did. By the way, I gotta mention that they put the Abomaton soldier as an actual listing on the website. It's $9,999 US and it's permanently sold out. That's just amazing. And Alex Hirsch, I know you're a big fan of mine and are obviously going to be watching this. I'm sorry I haven't seen Gravity Falls. I did not know you had this much emotional range, dude.
You're all just making fun of me like usual, right? No. I don't know what to do, Luce. I can't tell what's real and what's fake.
I can't believe this show almost made me cry at this stupid little comic relief demon dog. Keeping Up A-fear-ances centers entirely around Eda's curse and the rifts it's caused between Eda, Lilith, and their mother Gwendolyn. Now, when we knew Gwendolyn was going to be in this episode, everyone was wondering what exactly she was going to be like. Was she going to be like Luce's mother or more like Amity's mother? And she ended up kind of being a bit of a mixture. She's basically the embodiment of doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. After seeing how much Eda was suffering with the curse, she was literally willing to try anything to get rid of it completely, ignoring Eda's attempt to simply manage it and ultimately driving a wedge between the two of them. Ever since the curse was introduced to us back in Season 1, Episode 4, it's been a pretty obvious allegory for a physical or mental illness, and this episode only furthers that, and does it so well. And because of Gwen's obsession with helping Eda, Lilith was pretty much sidelined and ignored for most of her childhood, which, considering the curse was Lilith's fault, I mean, there's some tragic irony right there. I mean, to be fair, we don't know if that neglect was always there or if it only started after the curse, but either way, it certainly didn't help. And when Gwen arrives at the Owl House, she doesn't even pay enough attention to Lilith to even realize that she is now sharing the curse with Eda. So I do want to say I really like how the whole plot of Gwen being scammed by Wortlop is, again, a pretty obvious allegory for people who are sucked into that anti-pharmaceutical, anti-vax, traditional medicine way of thinking. And you know, while that's easy to poke fun of and there are people who take that to a malicious level, most of it does come from a genuine place of care from people who are just scared and want answers from somewhere. And unfortunately there are people who will take advantage of that. And I like that they show Gwen actually coming to her senses and realizing what she's been doing is wrong. It's such a nice moment when she comes through and tames both Eda and Lilith in their owl beast forms, and ultimately accepts the curse for what it is and trusts that the elixirs are a substantial way to manage it. So yeah, overall, another great episode. And it's at the very end where we first get a piece of the puzzle that might lead to Luce finding a way back home. Oh yeah, and then that scene happened.
Hey!
Thanks.
What the fuck is that? What am I supposed to do? Okay, bye!
Through the Looking Glass Ruins is an episode centered on Gus, which is great because we haven't got one of those since Something Ventured, Something Framed. Speaking of which, we see the return of Bartholomew, and we're introduced to these 3 new characters, Bria, Gavin and Angmar, who are all Gladys students. And I like how they initially seem really nice, and then when Bartholomew shows up, we were all like, oh, not him. I hate him. And then by the end of the episode, it's the complete other way around. So yeah, the Gladys students end up being total jerks, and his name is so flippin' hard to say. Bartholomew is the one who comes to Gus's aid and helps him out. And the episode ends with them not exactly being friends, but on better terms with each other at least. So Gus wonders if it's worth continuing his illusion spells because compared to other types of magic which actually have physical impact, illusions are just illusions, and are kind of treated as a joke to a lot of people. Which makes me wonder why exactly Edric and Emera are on the illusion track when their parents are so obsessed with status. Anyway, Gus tries to show off using some of Luce's glyph magic, and that works, but ultimately it's his illusions which come through in the end, and the whole sequence of him scaring Bria by turning the entire graveyard into some horrific nightmare is great. I gotta say, I love how at least most of the characters in this show aren't stupid. Like, Bria immediately knows it's all an illusion, and she keeps telling herself that, even when getting a little scared by it, and it's only when the statue physically grabs her leg that she freaks out and runs away. Because that's the thing about illusion magic, like while it has its limits and can't do any physical harm or anything, it can really mess you up mentally if you can use it to its full potential. And that's it, yeah. It's not my favorite episode, but it's still pretty good. Oh, wait. There was a B-plot, wasn't there? Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that Gus's story was completely overshadowed by all the stuff with Luce and Amity that happened in this episode. But yeah, I mean, we gotta talk about that. Where do I even begin? So knowing that we were going to get more of Luce and Amity in this episode, I went into it expecting one of two things. Either they were going to somewhat confess their feelings for each other, or it would just be another Gay Panic episode, but like a double-sided one. And I would have been happy with either. To my surprise, they kind of did both. So this seems like a good time as any to actually talk about Luce and Amity's relationship as a whole, rather than what they actually do in this episode, because it's not actually that much. And this is where it like properly starts, I guess. I mean, I did a whole section gushing about it in my last video, and at that point it was still pretty much completely one-sided. But now that I'm actually watching each new episode as it airs along with everyone else and seeing their relationship actually develop firsthand, I love it. I love the fact that this exists in the first place. I love all the bits where they're just blushing at each other, and I love the scene where they say that being around each other makes them do stupid things and they get all teared up, and it's just so cute and I can't deal with it. And I love the way it kind of harkens back to Enchanting Gromfright in subtle ways, like with Luce stepping up and getting Amity's job back, similar to how she was willing to face Grom on her behalf, and she even slicks her hair back in the exact same way. And then when Amity looks at the staff card that Luce was able to get back for her, it probably reminded her of her note from that episode. And then that's when she musters up the courage to kiss Luce on the cheek, and everyone lost their minds.
I almost just fell!
Also, I wasn't initially a big fan of Amity's new hair. Like, I get the symbolism, but her old hair had such a unique look to it, even if it was purely her mother's decision to have it be green. But I'm definitely getting used to the pink now. It does serve as a good distinction between the old can't show weakness Amity and the new actually being herself Amity. And after all that, I, along with many others, was eagerly awaiting for the next episode to see how it resolved. Oh, she's not even in the next episode? Hunting Palismen starts off with our first view of Emperor Belos this season, aside from that tiny clip at the end of Separate Tides, which I think was just made to give a good ending to the trailer. And we get a good look at all the Coven leaders, who I really hope we see more of later on, because based off what we've seen of Rain, Darius, and Eberwolf so far, seems like these guys are absolute masters of each of their magic types, to a degree that we've never seen anyone else practicing them even get close to. Also, some people had suspected Darius, the Abomination Coven leader, is the father of Gavin from last episode. But are you guys forgetting? We already saw Gavin's dad in that episode, remember?
Wait, when did you grow a mustache?
Oh, it's a fake, you idiot!
So Bella shows them a vision of the Day of Unity. So he basically wants to unite the human realm and the demon realm, which I don't know why I didn't put that together before. He has a portal to the human realm, and it's literally called the Day of Unity. I mean, I said this in my last video. We also know that he wants the portal to the human world that Luce came through, but we don't know why, other than that he said it's not for any kind of invasion or anything. So I'm very interested to know what's going to happen with that, and what exactly the so-called Day of Unity is. The pieces were right there, man. What are you doing? Anyway, Belos starts feeling off, and the Golden Guard escorts him out, much to the dismay of Kikimora. And I just want to briefly talk about her. I know everyone hates Kikimora, and in the context of the show, I do too. But she has such a cool design. I love it, especially the whole like severed hand thing on her head that's supposed to look like hair, with the little parting between the finger and the thumb showing off one of her eyes. That's such a clever character design. And then we see Emperor Belos morph into this weird, unstable mud creature, and apparently that's why he's consuming Palismen to suppress those outbursts. And unfortunately, they're running out. Well, fortunately, I should say, because we're not rooting for him. And that also begs the question, why didn't he do that with Albert back in Youngblood Old Souls? I mean, maybe they weren't running low then, but he orders Lilith to just destroy it? Minor nitpick, I know, but this whole absorbing Palismen energy was already set up by then, so that doesn't really add up. I mean, for all I know, this could be 100% intentional and just hasn't been explained yet. So Belos orders the Golden Guard, who is apparently his nephew, although it's not clear whether he's an actual blood relative or not, to go and capture more Palismen. And then the title sequence plays. Oh my god, we've got 20 minutes left of the episode to cover. Oh hey, they changed the opening credits. So it's Palismen Adoption Day at Hexside, and Luce is the only one who doesn't get one because she doesn't have her future completely planned out. And while it's kind of unrealistic that seemingly everybody else does, I do like that this aspect of Luce is addressed here. Also, I'd be crazy not to mention the reveal of Principal Bump's luscious hair hidden under his Palismen.
Someday my hair is going to be big enough to do that too. You actually want that?
But going back to Luce, when she first arrived on the Boiling Isles, her main goal was to become a witch, and as of the end of Season 1, her second goal is to find a way back to the human realm. But then what? She can't use her magic there, and what would she even do with it if she could? Luce isn't really the kind of person to have planned ahead that far. So this episode is also the one that properly introduces us to the Golden Guard, aka Hunter. It's funny, when his name was revealed, I remember people saying, wow, that's such a typical white boy name, when I can only think of two other fictional hunters. One's black and the other's a cheetah, so that doesn't really hold up in my mind. But this episode gives us more of an insight into the kind of person Hunter is. So is this the episode that made him click with me?
No.
I definitely liked him a lot more than in Separate Tides, though. And I think that's because, aside from his little quirks, he was mostly putting on an act in that episode. Turns out he's actually very conflicted. He wants to help his uncle, but he's also very interested in wild magic and wants to learn more about it. And I do like his dynamic with Luce.
Don't lick my hand. What the fuck? Why did I do it? Because fuck the rules, nigga.
Many people have pointed out that they kind of have a sibling vibe with each other. And yeah, I guess I can kind of see that. Which is also why it's so weird that there are people who ship them. I mean, I said in my last video that I'm not completely against shipping because it is ultimately harmless. But it's still weird. I mean, I'm not just going to pretend it's not just to appease the people who do ship them. Especially considering we already have Amity. And when you have these ships like Luce and Hunter, Gus and Bartholomew, and Willow and Boscha, I mean, you know the only reason people are shipping them is because they have that same rivals to friends dynamic that Luce and Amity had. Except that Willow and Boscha are still rivals, so that one doesn't make any damn sense. I mean, the only non-canon ship that I'm in any way on board with is maybe Gus and Willow, but at the same time, I kind of like that they're just friends, and I definitely don't expect that to change anytime soon. Also, maybe Hoot Lingo. Hey guys, it's currently Saturday morning, Saturday the 14th. I'm literally just about to go and watch episode 10, yesterday's live. But as this is probably close to the halfway point of the video, I just want to say thanks for those of you who are still watching and still listening. Really appreciate that. And if you are, I want you to leave a comment and have that comment include the word ginormous. But do it in a kind of nonchalant way so that other people don't pick up on it, but just so I can get a decent idea of how many people actually watch this far into the video. Wish me luck, and I'll let you get back to whatever episode it was that we were on.
Rain's Rhapsody. More like Ada's Requiem, am I right?
She said it! She said it!
Yeah, I'm just gonna come right out and say it. This episode made me cry, which is weird. because I'm not really somebody who cries at things very often, so I usually consider it an impressive feat if a piece of media is able to get that out of me. But honestly, this has been a really emotional half a season. Thinking about it now, there's only been a couple episodes where no one cries. At least one character is in tears in most of these episodes. This episode introduces us to Reign, who is the new head of the Bard Coven, and is also the person we saw an obscured photo of in Eda's yearbook back in Wing It Like Witches. Reign is also the first canonically non-binary character in a Disney show. I've got to mention that I do love how completely normalized the queer representation is in this show. It's not a big deal at all. Outside of the show, it's a big deal, yeah, and people should definitely be celebrating it, but in the context of the show, nobody bats an eye. Get it? Bats? Because their little rebellion team is called the Bats? And seeing how it was handled in this episode, it kind of made me realize how ridiculously easy it is to just have a non-binary character in your show. Literally the only thing you have to do is just have other characters refer to them with they/them pronouns, and you've done it. And I may be wrong, but I don't really see how censors could have a problem with that, because it's still grammatically correct. I mean, not that they should have a problem with any of it anyway, but you know what I mean. A lot of stuff happens in this episode, and I don't really feel like going over a lot of it. Not because it's bad or boring, but just because I don't want to, alright? It's my video, I'll do what I want. What I do want to talk about specifically is the music. Because the music this season has been really good overall, but it's obviously especially prominent in this episode. The most notable one being the tune that I still don't know if it's officially called Reign's Rhapsody or Eda's Requiem. Either way, that melody, the one that is permanently ingrained in my memory now. We hear it 4 times throughout the episode, all in completely different contexts, but the final one where Reign and Eda are playing together is the most hard-hitting. The entire sequence where they're playing the song to trap the Coven leaders is... I mean, it really is just one of the most, heartbreakingly beautiful moments of the show so far. Everything about it is perfect. The animation is obviously stellar. I've got to give props for that first and foremost. I have noticed a big improvement in the animation this season, and I'm not just talking about those few select moments like the fight scenes and stuff. Because after editing the first few episodes of Season 1, I have noticed that some of the animation is a little bit stilted in those early episodes. It's definitely stepped up a notch this season. The music is absolutely gorgeous. I could gush about that for hours. Again, it's the same melody that Eda's played 3 times already this episode, and somehow that just makes it so much more impactful here with both of them playing together for the final time. Because when you have that lead-in with Reign on the violin, it just makes that first note, that very first note that Eda plays, so perfect. I can't describe how powerful that single B is, so I'm just going to play the clip. I love the little foot tap thing Eda does, the way it lights up the forest initially and then the darkness starts to cover everything as the music gets more suspenseful. And then when they realize it's starting to consume both of them as well, and Eda's willingness to sacrifice herself because she thinks she's not needed anymore. And then when Reign sees the photo and questions Eda about it, and she stops for a second, but then still decides to carry on playing after saying both Luce and King have real families to return to, and Reign has to step in and stop her. The whole sequence is just so unbelievably perfect. I've watched this so many times now, and I can't give it enough praise. It's just breathtaking. I don't care how pretentious this makes me sound. It is really just so damn good. And I love the little moment at the end with King making a video message to his dad and legally changing his last name to Clawthorn to show his appreciation for Eda and her actually being the one who raised him and looked after him. And after everything Eda just went through, this gesture causes her to just break down in tears, and it's so lovely. It's just a great episode. And yet again, Amity was not in this episode, aside from a very brief cameo at the end watching King's video. So, it looks like we're going to have to wait until Eclipse Lake before we see the aftermath of the kiss. Because, I mean, she's definitely not going to be in the next episode, right?
So it's episode 8.
Yep.
And it's split into 3 stories.
Yep. So, it's like Once Upon a Swap. No, it's nothing like Once Upon a Swap.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. This is my favorite episode of the entire show so far. Like I said, I think pretty much everybody was expecting this. Even if none of the others were, this would be a filler episode, or at least the closest we'd get to one this season. It would just be a fun little romp centered around the comic relief character, Hooty. No big reveals, no character-driven moments, no delves into the deep lore. Just a simple slice of life. And I, for one, have never been happier to be so completely wrong. Now, ignoring the fact that the timeline of this episode makes absolutely no sense at all because when the episode begins, it's night and presumably this all takes place in one night. However, after the opening credits, it's daytime when King is reading books in the kitchen and Hooty specifically says that he's going to start with King's problem. And while granted King's section has a few time jumps, so it's possible Hooty was dealing with the others in between, for example after sampling his blood, but we see Hooty going to deal with Eda's problem only after failing with King's, and Eda's dream was supposed to last hours and Hooty presumably wasn't just watching her sleep the entire time, but the Twinsanity section all happens in real time. Not only that, but we know it begins directly after her running to her room in the pre-credit scene, and Hooty was eavesdropping on her talking to herself for about half a minute before leaving, so Hooty would have had to kidnap Amity, create the entire tunnel of love, and write the letter in about 10 seconds, and while you could assume that he'd been working on the tunnel for a while before that, that doesn't explain the sign that says I think you're smart, cool, and classy, because Luce only said that after Hooty had already left the room, and the tunnel scene itself lasts about 5 minutes, with Hooty most likely keeping an eye on all of it, but once it's over we find out both King and Eda's stories have already happened, and Eda's already woken up, so when did the kitchen scene take place, why did Eda only sleep for about 5 or 10 minutes, and how is Hooty keeping track of all of it all at the same time? Ignoring that, I know I keep bringing up Once Upon a Swap, but this really is exactly how to do the whole 3 segmented stories with them all coming together in the end in a satisfying way thing. So it's funny that, in my mind at least, that format has created both the worst and best episodes of this show so far. So King's section is about him and Hooty trying to figure out exactly what kind of demon he is in the hopes that it may get him closer to finding his dad. So this is just a lot of fun, this whole section, and King's little dance is adorable, even if it is highly offensive. And I love that after getting nowhere, Hooty tries to put a positive spin on it, saying that it doesn't matter where you came from, what matters is who you choose to be and that you have people who love you. Kind of similar to the message Eda gave Luce back in season 1. But in this case, King wanted actual answers, and him getting mad and upset inadvertently leads to him discovering something about himself. Get ready for an obvious meme.
There's one they fear, King Dragonborn.
Eda's dream sequence is probably my favorite part of the episode. Like I said, it's been alluded to that her curse is portrayed as a disability, and we know of the challenges it's caused her. But here in these flashback sequences, we kind of get to see firsthand exactly how it's affected her past experiences and her relationships. That she physically attacked her dad in a pretty graphic way as well. Like, props to them for being able to show blood like that. We got to see Rain again briefly here too, in another flashback, which I don't think anyone was expecting. And I both love and hate that in this flashback we get confirmation that Eda and Rain were in fact dating, but we get that confirmation in the form of Rain saying,
I think we should see other people.
Which is very bittersweet. And then it all culminates in this really beautiful scene showing the Owl Beast and Eda being tethered together. I don't think anyone had really considered before that the Owl Beast was trying to get away from Eda just as much as she was trying to get away from it. And they both learned to just stop fighting each other and accept that what's done is done. And this whole scene is just so beautifully animated. I love the black and white with only the red tether having any color, and then the yellow glow of the elixir lighting them both up before the sky just fills with this vibrant color spectrum. I can't get over how good this show looks sometimes. And this all results in this new Owl Beast form for Eda. And I mean, do I even need to say how cool this looks? Like, you can see it, right? And then we get onto Luce's section, which I think most people were expecting to have something to do with the Echo Mouse and Hooty trying to help with that, even though his attempt last time didn't go great. But Hooty was just out here like, nah, I know what you guys really want. And he flippin' delivered. I mean, what can I really say about this that hasn't been said by hundreds of people already? I mean, after 2 episodes of Luce and Amity seemingly avoiding each other, I love that Hooty just kidnaps Amity and just forces them both to confront what happened in episode 5. It's honestly surprising how many people accurately predicted that that's what Hooty would do. Somehow, some people just saw that coming, and yet everyone was equally caught off guard when she just appeared in this episode. I really like the dynamic of Luce and Amity simultaneously thinking the other isn't as interested in them as they are, and then that just causes them to act like they're not interested either, even though they are. and the whole tunnel of love sequence just turns into a nightmare for both of them, but for different reasons. Luce thinking that this over-the-top extravagant performance is going to make Amity make fun of her because seemingly this has happened to her in the past, and so she panics and starts destroying it. Also, seriously, does Luce just have like an infinite supply of pre-drawn glyphs on little bits of paper just on her at all times? But then doing that is what makes Amity think that she is against the whole idea of the two of them dating in general, which is really sad actually, because we know from Grom that her biggest fear was being rejected by Luce, and this, in her eyes, is that exact fear playing out in real life. And so after Hooty thinking he failed yet again, he goes on this destructive rampage, and this is where all three stories culminate into this really great sequence of them all using their newfound abilities to save each other. I love this entire scene. I love this entire episode. It's so perfect. And then, of course, we get the infamous, equally awkward but wholesome scene of Luce and Amity asking each other out, and them officially becoming a couple. And that's it. It is undisputably 100% canon now, and even Disney themselves have no choice but to acknowledge it. Wait, hang on. Lucity?
Well, I tried.
So you remember all the way back in my first video essay when I was talking about what constitutes something being groundbreaking? This is groundbreaking. Get it? Because the ground breaks underneath them. I'm on a roll with these jokes. Just seeing Luce and Amity's relationship evolve in literally episode they're in, in literally every episode they're in, has just been such a joy to watch across the first 1.5 seasons.
I challenge you to a witch's duel. I accept. Amity Blight, do you want to go out with me? Yes! Okay!
Also, because I just showed that clip from Convention, I just want to point out that this is my favorite gag from the entire show, and it only lasts half a second. But honestly, I haven't been this obsessed with an on-screen couple since... Actually, I've never been this obsessed with an on-screen couple. Does the fact that it's a queer relationship play into that? Maybe? Probably. Who can really say? I think it's more so that it's just so well written and feels genuine, and it's not being arbitrarily stretched out across the whole show, only having a payoff in the final scene of the final episode. No, 8 episodes into season 2 and they're already officially dating. I mean, I said in my last video that I wish I was watching this show when things like the Grom episode aired, and that I couldn't imagine what it must have felt like watching that firsthand. Now I flippin' know what that feels like, and it's amazing. I love seeing this relationship develop in every episode the two of them are in together, and I love them so much. They're just so cute and adorable, and I just... Okay, I've calmed down. We're good. Yeah, I have a lot to say about this episode, surprisingly. But it's basically only about one specific aspect of the episode that I just absolutely adore, and not really much else, because while Eclipse Lake was pretty darn good, I do think it suffered a bit in terms of how hyped up it was. And in hindsight, I don't really know why it was hyped up so much. It's kind of the complete inverse of what happened with the last episode. Everyone was expecting this to be some huge monumental thing, when in reality it was not exactly. By this season's standards, this was okay. But I mean, again, that's by this season's standards, so that still says a lot. So I'll go over the other things first. We get a Belos face reveal, which I don't really know what to think about, because, I mean, other than a minor facial deformity, he kind of just looks like a regular guy. I mean, I'm much less scared of him now than I was before, but somehow, at the same time, I'm much more scared of him now than I was before. Could have done with a bit more of a B-plot with Willow and Gus looking after Luce. Oh yeah, Willow still exists.
Gotta admit, Amity, seeing you around more often is different.
She's had twice as much screen time as you this season. And King and Eda don't really have an awful lot to do aside from testing out their new abilities, but honestly, they kind of impair the mission more than help with it. And I didn't mention this in Hunting Palismen, but I really like how Hunter's Palismen, the little red bird, is just, like, always there. Sometimes you don't even notice it, but it's literally always there, just watching over Hunter and doing its best to help him, and how it's just perfectly happy to be resting on the shoulders of the other characters, even when Hunter himself is personally against them. Also, Amity's Palismen is a white cat named Ghost, and Dana has a white cat named Ghost. She literally just put her own cat into the show, so that's pretty cool. And I love that Kikimora's become so obsessed and paranoid with being upstaged by Hunter that she has literally gone insane. But what I really want to talk about, where this episode really shines, and what is something that I don't really think I fully appreciated the first few times watching it, is basically everything between Amity and Hunter, the latter of whom may or may not be an artificial clone. So, Is this the episode that made Hunter click with me?
Yes.
And that's probably because of the parallels they draw between him and Amity. How they both need the Titan's blood so as not to disappoint the person they care about. And even though Luz is the main character and Belos is the antagonist, in a weird way you're kind of rooting for both of them. The difference being that while Belos has already been shown to be somewhat abusive to Hunter when he fails, which is so detrimental that he literally starts digging his own grave when he realizes he's going to return empty-handed. Whereas Luz is obviously nothing like that, but it kind of makes sense why Amity would kind of feel that way, because their relationship has only just properly started, and she spent her whole life thinking that love and appreciation comes from accomplishments. And Hunter is able to play into that, making her believe that Luz's little Tamagotchi messages are her way of saying if she fails, they're going to break up, when in reality she's just sending her cute messages of encouragement and support. By the way, who expected to see a Tamagotchi in a cartoon in 2021? And I say play into that because on first viewing, I thought that was what Hunter was doing, purposely manipulating Amity to his own advantage. But actually doing that would have no advantage. If anything, it would make Amity fight harder to get the Titan's blood. In fact, that's exactly what it does. On rewatches, I realized that Hunter says this because he genuinely believes that disappointing someone who cares about you is enough to make them stop caring. And right after he tells Amity that he's digging his own grave, he asks,
Want me to make you one too?
And this mentality is something that Amity used to believe as well, even in the beginning of this episode. I mean, after all, the only reason she goes on the quest with Eda and King is to prove to Luz that she is an awesome girlfriend.
I'll show Luz that I am an awesome girlfriend. I'm an awesome girlfriend. As Luz's girlfriend, I
get it!
But then when they get back, before Luz even knows whether they succeeded or not, she just immediately hugs Amity and says,
I'm so glad my awesome girlfriend is okay.
And I love the moment of Amity trying to comfort Hunter by sharing her realization. How you don't need to prove your worth if you can find people who care about you unconditionally. Why is Amity just the best character ever? And then that is immediately interrupted by Hunter noticing the key. So now I need to talk about the Hunter and Amity fight. I mean, the fight sequences in this show have always been amazingly done, and I've already praised Eda and Lilith's fight to death, but this might just be the best one the show has ever done. The animation is ridiculously fluid. I love Hunter rapidly teleporting about the place. I love the bullet hell he creates at the start, knowing that the magic bounces off the walls in these caves. I love his little Palismen still protecting him, even though he's been a bit hesitant to even want him around. I love that giant fist thing he summons, just like in his first appearance in Separate Tides. I love King helping out in the fight, and that he just gets his horns impaled and gets stuck. I love the way Amity is in constant control of the Abomination goop, trapping Hunter with it, picking it up, deflecting the beams with it, using it as a shield, and then morphing it into a fist. And when she punches him, there's a little A that flashes up on screen, encasing him in a ball of it, and when he breaks out, she just immediately pulls it back to soften her landing before turning it into a blade right at the very end. It's honestly just a perfectly choreographed and executed battle, and the music is intense as hell. I've listened to it on its own so many times now. And I think a lot of the enjoyment just comes from seeing these two characters battle each other finally. And can we just appreciate Amity's ridiculously quick thinking right afterwards? I get why she gave him the key. Hunter threatened Luz, so I get why Amity kind of had to give in.
Fine. Just stay away from Luz.
By the way, she totally should have said my Luz there. That would have been such a good callback, but whatever. But before handing it over, she breaks the key in her hand. And at first I thought, oh, she's just destroyed the key, so now nobody can use it. That didn't really help anyone. But it turns out she just cracked it, so some of the blood leaked out onto her hand, which is that's just so smart. So now they've each got some of it, and neither one of them has to return empty-handed, which was just such a nice way to cap off the episode. Like I said, even though he's working for the bad guys and he pulls some pretty jerkish moves in this episode, you can't help but root for Hunter a little bit. I mean, I remember people claiming that Eclipse Lake kind of undid his redemption in hunting Palismen, but like, what redemption? Are you misremembering that episode? I mean, he was very much still willing to take the Palismen from Luz by the end, and the only reason she got away was because he was distracted fighting Kikimora. And at the end of the episode, he's very clearly upset over failing the mission. I think maybe some people are expecting Hunter to just go through that same redemption arc we've seen multiple characters go through already, but they're not really doing that with him, or at least they're not doing it in the same way. I'm certainly not expecting an episode where he just decides to join the good side. I mean, for one, he probably believes he's on the good side. And I think they kind of learned their lesson with Lilith, who essentially, after realizing Belos lied to her, just goes, okay, I'm on the good side now then. But Hunter obviously has a much closer relationship with Belos, so if they are going to have some kind of betrayal on his part that'll make Hunter go against him, it's going to have to be a pretty damn big one. Oh shit, he's gonna kill his bird, isn't he? Okay, just to preface this, every part of the video up until this was written and recorded before Yesterday's Lie aired. This is because I could only really record on Thursdays or Fridays, and I didn't want to have to wait almost an entire week before I could start editing this video. I don't think it's going to affect anything, because I have been writing most of these sections from the perspective of this is the most recent episode, even if it wasn't, because I didn't start this script until we were at least 6 episodes in. So, now I'll hand it over to future NP. Thanks, past NP. I'm older now, so it's very difficult to go into these episodes with no expectations whatsoever, because you're never going to get what you expect to get. Yesterday's Lie was definitely not what I expected to get, but, you know, I still feel very satisfied with this. I really like this episode. This was the last episode before the hiatus, but we're only halfway through this season, so thankfully I wasn't expecting it to feel like a season finale, because it didn't. Season 1's mid-season finale was Escape of the Palismen, and that was just kind of a dull episode. I mean, Yesterday's Lie was far from dull, but it is one of the tamest of Season 2. It sort of felt like an epilogue in a weird way. So this episode takes place pretty much entirely in the human realm, and we finally get an explanation as to who exactly this creepy Luce is.
What would you do if somebody came up to you and they looked just like you and they said, "Hey, I'm the real you"?
I would kill myself.
And I think it's safe to assume was also writing the letters to Camila in Enchanting Grandpré. And she is in no way creepy at all. In fact, she's one of the most adorable characters in the show. And that's saying something.
You want a set?
Yes, please.
By the way, can we talk about how good this show is at just introducing us to a new character and having us instantly love them? I really like V, way more than I thought I would, and I felt really bad for her. You know, what life she did have in the demon realm was very traumatic for her, which is why she freaks out both times she gets captured in this episode, and also why she runs away from the talking rats, because she spent most of her imprisonment being forced to drain the magic from rats. Also, I love that it's the complete inverse with Luce, who is just perfectly happy and willing to talk to the rats, but is very hesitant for V to approach people her own age. Also, V is voiced by Michaela Dietz, who voiced Amethyst in Steven Universe. I haven't even watched Steven Universe, and even I immediately recognized that voice. I think a few people had suspected that despite impersonating Luce, she wasn't going to be an evil character. And while it was technically Belos that made her come here, it wasn't really related to his plan or anything, and there wasn't any kind of malicious intent behind it on her part. But did anyone expect her to be another one of these things? I remember there were these theories floating around before that the camp that Luce would have gone to had some mysterious goings-on and created, like, well-behaved doppelgangers of the people, and I'm glad that that wasn't in any way true. Because it's similar to those Emperor Belos is Luce's father theories. I feel like those completely go against what I spoke about in my last video. How episode 2 clearly set up that Luce is not here for any kind of underlying reason, and she wasn't destined to save everyone or anything. It was all just pure chance that those things lined up for her to follow Albert into this mysterious house. Which, by the way, whose house is this? Considering this is where the original portal was tethered to, I have to assume this is like Philip's old house, right? But all of the goings-on the Boiling Isles had literally nothing to do with Luce until she arrived there, meaning this whole creepy Luce scenario had to have happened after that and not before, because the show would have just been completely contradicting itself if that was the case. But let's talk about some other aspects of this episode for a bit. I wasn't expecting this section to be as long as the last few, but as small as it seems, this episode had a lot in it. I like the whole reflection cube concept and how it shows you whoever's name you call out, which is why it showed Luce V when she said, "Just breathe and count to 5. Because V's name is literally 5. I just like it when they put in little things like that you only notice on a second viewing once you understand the context. And because of this episode taking place primarily in the human realm, it feels very detached from the rest of the show. Not in a bad way, I'm sure that's the intention. But even then, we still got another small dose of lore. Throughout this whole season, the most common and most popular theory has been Emperor Belos is actually the human Philip Witterbane, or a descendant of him. But did anyone stop to consider brothers? I mean, it's still too early to say for certain, but these are the kind of twist reveals that I like, where the pieces are there, and people put them together and get very close to the truth, but then there's just one small angle that you didn't see it from before. But going back to the main focus of this episode, I really appreciate that Yesterday's Lie addresses what Luce did by choosing to stay in the Boiling Isles. Obviously, she was planning to only stay there instead of going to camp, and then once camp ended, she had every intention of going back home. But then things got out of hand and the portal got destroyed. By her. And as inconsequential as it first seemed, I really like the bit where V's friend was giving her the reading and how what she said applies to both V and Luce. Both of them chose to leave their old lives in favor of one that would treat them better, but that came at a cost, and now they have to face up to that. I mean, Luce is pretty quick to forgive V for stealing her life, because it's clear that Luce isn't really that dead set on returning to her old life in the first place. The main thing she was worried about was that Camila would be going out of her mind wondering where Luce was, but V kinda took care of that. But then Camila, on the other hand, is understandably upset to learn that Luce chose to leave her. As much as Luce tries to convince her that she was never the reason Luce wanted to escape, it was just the world, her school, her life, everything made her feel like she didn't belong. But Camila did kind of contribute to that in the first episode. I mean, she also wanted Luce to just be like everybody else, so it makes sense why she would think she was the one who drove Luce away in the first place. Before this episode, there was a subset of the fandom who, only from her first and only appearance in the very first episode, had always viewed Camila as a bad parent for sending Luce to camp as a way to stamp out her weirdness. I don't know about you guys, but I never got that impression at all. She just didn't want Luce to suffer in school because of it. I mean, similar to Gwendolyn, she was simply doing what she thought was best for her daughter. Yeah, she probably went about it the wrong way and was maybe just blindly following what Luce's teachers were saying, but that doesn't make her a bad parent. I mean, come on, people have flaws, and I like that there is a couple moments in this episode where Camila feels regret for even doing that.
I'm just looking for a fresh start. Camp taught me a lot, you know?
Yes, it sure did.
And I like how happy she is to play along with what she thinks is one of Luce's games. It is only now when she's actually talking to the real Luce that she gets a glimmer of hope that her creativity isn't completely gone. And she even brings the box of Luce's things back inside. If I haven't said it already, the character writing in this show is just brilliant sometimes. Like, I'm running out of positive adjectives. So thank God we're nearly done. I really like the moment when, after failing to get through to V, Luce finally has to confront her mother to get her to help, but in doing so has to confess everything about where she's been. I like that we're now at a point where Amity and Luce have both successfully faced their greatest fears from Grom. I know I keep bringing up Grom, but that really was a milestone episode in more ways than one. And finally, as heart-wrenching as the scene in the rain is, I'm glad that it didn't end on some monumental cliffhanger. Because honestly, I don't think we would have been able to cope having to wait months for it to be resolved. It ended with Luce promising to Camila that once she comes home properly, she'll never go back, and then subsequently lying to the others about even making that promise. So this is good setup for the second half of the season, whenever that may be. I don't know, it might not even be until 2022 for all we know. And I was gonna say I can't wait, but you know what? I think I can. I don't think I really need to sum up. I'm gonna drink a bit of my tea, actually. I don't think I really need to sum up my thoughts on Season 2A very much. I think you can gather that I like it a lot. I was originally planning to rank all 10 episodes from worst to best in this section, but there wouldn't really be much point, and most of it would just be in arbitrary order, and I think you can probably guess what the number one spot would be anyway. I don't want to belittle Season 1, but I can't help but see this as a massive step up in quality. And I've no doubt that a lot of that comes down to the writers having a lot more free reign with what they can do with the show now. And I think they've caught on to the fact that despite it airing on Disney Channel, which has a typical demographic of early teens or younger, a big chunk of the people actually watching this show seem to be in their mid-20s like me. And the series definitely feels a lot more mature now, you know, dealing with heavier topics as well as with its real-world references.
No one watches crystal balls anymore. It's all about streaming.
Something called lo-fi beats to study and relax to.
I'll expose your vile plans on YouTube and finally get my account verified.
Speaking of streaming, the whole of Season 2A should now be on Disney Plus in the US. If you're in other regions like me, it's not yet for some reason. But hey, you can rewatch Season 1, because that really is one of the best ways to support the show. But yeah, again, I don't want to put down Season 1. I like Season 1, and I don't want to diminish all the work that went into that. But it just feels like they really know what they're doing now, and aren't having to bog the stories down with plots like Eda is addicted to card games, or King and Eda babysit some bats, or King severely traumatizes a bunch of toddlers. What was the moral they were going for with this one? But I'm so glad that I decided to keep watching this show. It's crazy to think that it's only really been a few months since I just decided to give it a shot after only hearing about it in passing, and it's already had this much of an effect on me, and it's just been a real joy to experience firsthand in a way that I never really have with any other show before. I mean, Doctor Who is basically the only other show that I religiously watch on the day it airs, but I'm not all that involved with the discourse around that, especially at the moment because it's kind of toxic. But it's just been so cool being so heavily involved in this fandom, especially on the subreddit, reading theories and seeing fan art. I haven't seen what's going on Tumblr. I've heard it's a bit dicey over there, but also watching all the reaction videos about it from people like BDHeathyyy, Morgan Terry, EdaWiz, IAmZamber, The Third Bill, It's Rebecca Rose, Finn the Pony, and especially Not So Average Fangirl, who I showed that clip of earlier. She's just such a delight.
Thank God there's a wall here!
So if you're somebody like me who enjoys watching somebody watching something you've watched to see how they watch it, then watch some of them. So as much as I'm going to miss that for a little while now that we're on hiatus, I gotta say I am a little relieved. This show has completely consumed my thoughts for the past few months, that it'll be nice to take a break from it for a bit and actually be able to focus on anything else and get a decent night's sleep on Fridays. I have no doubt people were, but I don't remember hearing people talk about it very much before. And it's kind of hard to tell now, because now that I'm in those circles of recommended YouTube videos and frequent posts on the Owl House subreddit, and now when I see someone I know from outside of those circles casually mention the show, I'm like, hey, I know you. And you watch the Owl House as well? That's pretty dope. With the way I've been talking about these episodes, I've been kind of assuming that most of you watching this have seen the show. But if you haven't, and you're just watching this because it's an MP Carlson video, first off, thank you. Secondly, while yes, I have spoiled a lot of it, there's still a lot that I didn't talk about, and, you know, we still have another half a season to go, and then some. So if you are somebody who maybe judged the show initially and passed it off as, just doesn't seem like something I'm interested in, maybe now you might see that there's a bit more to it than what it seems on the surface, and you might think, you know what, I might get something I like out of this. And if that is the case, then I think I did my job perfectly. So thank you guys so much for sticking with me throughout this whole video. I mean, I know these kind of videos aren't exactly what people come to this channel for, and, you know, they don't get all that many views compared to some of my others, but I really appreciate those of you who are watching, and I'm glad that these do mean something to somebody, even if it's just a small handful of you guys. It's more than enough. Make sure to leave your ginormous comments, and thank you so much for what is now over 7 years on this channel. I've loved every moment of it, and I have no plans of stopping anytime soon. But speaking of what I do have planned for this last little chunk of the year, like I said, I've got some Owl House YTPs coming. I'll probably release the first one pretty soon, maybe like next week or something. But I'll leave a bit of a gap before I put out the second one, just to give them room to breathe, you know. I also have 3 collab entries in the works at the moment. Well, actually 2 of them are done. One of them is partly done. And that one's for a Christmas collab, so that obviously won't come out till Christmas. As for the other 2, I don't know when the full collabs are going to be done, but I'm hoping at least one of them will be before the end of the year. I don't know which one though. And depending on what happens with those, either around the end of the year or maybe the start of the next, I'm going to be doing another YTP retrospective. And this one will be covering the YouTube poops I made in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And despite this one covering 3 years and the last one was covering 2, I've only got about half as many YTPs to talk about as I did for the last one. But then again, this one will include both Ripto's Racist Reignited and Mash Bandicoot DLC, so I'm probably going to have a lot to say on both of those. On top of that, I don't know whether to do this before or after the retrospective, but I want to do a Everything Wrong with Mash Bandicoot DLC, because the last one I did on the original Mash Bandicoot was a lot of fun. And I might do what Valor4XD does and open it up to you guys to submit sins, and then I'll choose some of them to read out in the video. But, you know, I'll let you know when that's happening. And yeah, that's about it. So thanks for watching all the way to the end, and thanks for those of you in the live chat right now, and I'll see you soon.
Bye!